We are continuing with Yaakob, and we're going to be learning something interesting because, one of the problems with the study of the Agadot in the Talmud is that there are some who insist upon taking it literally. And there's a few problems with taking it literally, but it's fine, meaning I understand why some people want to take everything literally, but the main problem is that when you take things literally, you miss the beautiful message encoded in the Agadah. And there's always a beautiful message. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna read to you the Gemara. It's from Masechet Berachot Perek Aleph. It's in the Yaakob Seif Yot Chet. And I'm just gonna explain it literally. And then I will give you the more profound message, the more profound meaning encoded in the Agadah. So you all have the letter Yot Chet on the top of the page?
Yes.
Amar Rabbi Avin bar Rav Ida Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Menayin she'akadosh baruch hu maniach tefillin. How do we know, or from where do we learn, that the Almighty God, where's tefillin? Maniach tefillin. Now, of course, we put on tefillin because there's two mitzvot. There's a mitzvah to put tefillin shel yad. Shene'emar u'kshavtam le'ot al yadecha. There's a second mitzvah to put tefillin shel rosh. Shene'emar v'ayu le'totafot b'neinecha. So we have two mitzvot. That's why we put on tefillin. And when the Gemara says, how do we know that God puts on tefillin? What does that mean? So let me just take a step back and give you the following point of Maimonides, which to us seems intuitive, but back then, oddly enough, it was less intuitive. And that is, Maimonides writes that anybody who thinks that God is physical or has some sort of physical attributes or physical existence, Rambam says this person is a mean. A mean is, in English, a sectarian. Literally, a mean is an individual who is other than Jewish, meaning they may be born biologically Jewish, but because of their declared beliefs, in this case, the person declares that there are physical qualities to the Almighty, he becomes a mean. A mean loses his olam haba, loses his connection with the Jewish people. Worst category to be in is minut. Okay. Rambam writes this. I don't want to mention the name, but one of the rabbis from France. In France, there was a lot of opposition to Maimonides for some reason. Some of the French rabbis were so opposed to Maimonides that eventually the opposition went from France southward towards northern Spain. Back then, there was no country of Spain, by the way. People think, oh, we're from Spain. There was no Spain. There was different kingdoms. So the northern kingdom of Spain was the kingdom of Catalonia. They went to Catalonia and they brought the books of Maimonides to the Franciscan monks, and they convinced the church to burn the books of Maimonides. One of the really terrible travesties in Jewish history, but that's how deeply they hated Harambam. One of the points of contention between Harambam and some of the Chachmei Tzofat was the question of anthropomorphism, which is to say Harambam considers a person who thinks that God is somehow physical to be a mean. He writes so explicitly in Hilchot Teshuvah Perek Gimel that this is one of the categories of mean, is if you say God has physical attributes, whatever those physical attributes are, you cut yourself off from the Jewish people. You are now a sectarian. One of the famous commentators, again, just out of respect, because I don't like criticizing people who are no longer with us, even if I disagree with them, writes against Maimonides. He says, how can Rambam write this? There are many great rabbis in France, which is where this commentator comes from, who disagree with Rambam and who think that there is physical qualities to the Almighty. So this was a very contentious point in Jewish history. Of course, today we all know that. No rabbi, at least to my knowledge, I hope, no rabbi says, no. Maimonides was wrong, and those rabbis were right. We all understand now that, of course, that's Christianity. It's the Christians who give physical attributes, not the Jews, right? So today, the matter has been settled. Let's put it that way. And also, we understand. We understand intellectually the ramifications of saying that God is physical. All right, put that on the side. But here, the Gemara says, Menayin she'akadosh baruch hu maniach tefillin. How do we know that the Almighty puts on tefillin? Seems to be anthropomorphic. And indeed, many of those rabbis who disliked Rambam, they would bring Gemariot like this to support their thesis that there are anthropomorphic attributes to the Almighty. Okay, so we have to understand what this Gemara is saying. It's very important. But they took it literally. Obviously, to reach the conclusion that God is somehow physical, you have to take this text literally, right? Which is what they did. By the way, I should just add one more thing. These rabbis came from France, which was a Christian country, where the Christians themselves had anthropomorphic beliefs, and northern Spain, Catalonia, that was Christian. Southern Spain, Andalusia, was Muslim, but at least northern Spain, Catalonia, was heavily influenced by the Christians. So just giving you a little. Yes, Barcelona. Right, exactly, Barcelona. Eventually the Christians, they took over also southern Spain later on, and then when they took over, the Moors came from North Africa. Spain was originally under the Goths, and then the Muslims took over, and then the fanatic Muslims took over the more normal Muslims, because in the days of Rambam, when he was young, there was still the Umayyads, who were normal Muslims, very scientific, very philosophical. Then the crazy Muslims came from North Africa, more like the ISIS type Islamic Caliphate. Yeah, they were so fanatic that they killed off all the normal Muslims, meaning the Moors from northern Spain, the Almoravides, they were known. They were so fanatical that many of the, in fact, there's a story, I forgot who it was. It was a famous Muslim philosopher that Averroes, that they say that he hid in the house of Rambam because they wanted to kill him, right? So these Muslim fanatics came and they basically killed off the normal Muslims. They were so fanatical that, for example, any musical instruments were burned, destroyed. Even the interior of the mosques, they had beautiful artwork. When the crazy Muslims came, they destroyed all the artwork. Whatever. We can do a psychological study of what this means and what this tells us about the fanatical Muslims, but that's not the purpose of this class. The purpose of this class is to address the point that you made. Then the Christians came, right, and they kicked out the Muslims. This is in, I think, if I'm not wrong, something like the 13th century, and then eventually 14th century, and then you had the Spanish Inquisition. I could be off by a century or two, I don't, but the Spanish Inquisition came because the Christians were so fanatical that they didn't want to tolerate the Jews unless they convert into Christianity. So that's what happened in terms of and that's why today the Muslims, they always talk about the Reconquista. What is the Reconquista? They want to reconquer Spain because Andalusia was like, they conquered Andalusia. That was their Muslim kingdom. So they want to reconquer it from the Christians. So it's their dream. So their dream is to one day take over Spain. And they might do so, by the way.
They're doing it indirectly.
They might do it, exactly. It might work out. I don't know. I'm not, but the demographics seem to suggest that they're on the way to realizing the dream of the Reconquista. But okay, getting back now, let's go back to the Gemara. Okay, so we're going to read it. As the verse says, Nishba Adonai bimino ubizroa uzo. So God is making an oath, a solemn oath to the Jewish people that he will remember Jerusalem. He will remember the city of Jerusalem. And it says, when God makes an oath, so when a person makes an oath, where does a person make an oath on? A person makes an oath either on a Sefer Torah, right? That's the real Shivu'ah. Today we don't do it because we're scared, rightfully so. So a person makes an oath on a Sefer Torah. Or if it's a Tamim Chacham, he can make an oath on a pair of Tefillin. So he holds the Tefillin and he makes the Shivu'ah on the Tefillin. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu make the Shivu'ah on? That's the question of the Gemara.
Wasn't it
If it is one of part of the body, well, they used to swear on or no?
Right, you're saying in the days of Avraham Avinu, because there was no Sefer Torah, because the Yerech is the place where the Berit Milah was, so they were signifying that the Berit between God and Abraham was holy. Okay, so that's that. All right, so what does God make the Shavua on? It says He makes it on His bimino. Bimino means literally His right arm. Ubizra uzon, His strong arm, right? So the Gemara says, Yemino en Yemino el Torah. The right arm of God is the Torah. God doesn't have a right arm. God doesn't have an arm. God doesn't have any physicality. So when it says that God makes the Shavua on His right arm, the right arm is it's an analogy or mashal, allegory for the Torah, Shneimar. And where do we see that the Torah is referred to as the right of the Almighty? Because and in Perashat Zot HaBeracha, which is the end of the 5 books of Moses, Moses describes what happened in Mount Sinai. And in this description, he says God gave us the Torah, and this is the words that Moses uses to describe God giving us the Torah. Mimino esh dat lamo. On the right side of God, there was a fiery law, the fiery law being the Torah, given to the Jewish people. Lamo means to us. Esh dat lamo. So mimino. So you see the yamin of God refers to the Torah that God gave the Jewish people in Sinai. Until now clear? So when God makes the Shavua, what does He make the Shavua? He makes the Shavua on the Torah. Okay. The en uzo. So what's the uzo? Well, we said oz is like strength. Ela tefillin. This refers to the tefillin of God. Shene'emar, Adonai oz le'amo yiten. So one of the blessings that God gives the Jewish people is oz. So let me ask you a question. What does the word oz mean, really? Oz means strength. But it could have said Hashem koach le'amo yiten. God gives His nation koach. Is there a difference between the word koach, which means physical strength, and oz? You understand my question? Now it says God gives us oz, right? What does that mean? Not bad. Oz means psychological strength, meaning we have a certain fierceness to us. We're not afraid to assert what we believe in. That's psychological strength, right? Psychological strength is sometimes you see a person, he has to pray mincha, he's in a public place, he prays mincha. I once went skiing with your brothers, I don't know how many decades ago. Maybe if I look at the passage of time, actually maybe even close to half a century ago. We once went skiing in Hunter Mountain, and we realized we have to pray mincha. They had like a ski lodge down on the base, and we suddenly realized it's time to pray mincha. We just stood up in the middle, did netilah, stood up in the middle. Everybody's like sitting around, and we're like standing there praying mincha. It takes a psychological strength, right? Also, right, to do that, you need a certain fierceness. Like you're doing what you believe in, and you don't care that people think it looks weird or this. You're an individual by yourself. This is different than, let's say, when the Muslims, they come 1,000 people and they take over an intersection. That's not Oz, right? Because you have 1,000 people. Okay, it's 1,000, but you're 2 people. Jews do that. Right? We have psychological strength. Okay. So that's the tefillin. How do we know that the tefillin gives us that psychological strength? Tichtiv, the pasuk says that in the Messianic era, there will come a day that all the nations of the world will see. They will see that the name of God is called upon you. And they will have fear of you. Right? So people understand. By the way, I think people like Tucker Carlson, who's apparently he's a religious Christian, although lately he seems to be becoming a religious Muslim. I don't know anymore, honestly. I don't even know like what he is, but whatever. But I think one of the reasons people like that are so obsessed with the Jews is they see the truth. I mean, any person who has functional neurons in their brain, the prefrontal cortex works, even partially, they see what's happening to the Jews. It's unbelievable. Like this small, nothing country producing what it produces from technology to mathematics to physics to music to strength, the military strength of Israel. It drives them crazy. It drives them crazy because it means that their religion is not real. So it's saying that in the Messianic era, all the nations of the world will see the name of God called upon the Jewish people. And they will have fear of the Jewish people that realize, wow, this is something unusual. Vetanya, and there was a rabbinic statement on this very verse, which says, you know what the ultimate symbol of this fair is that they will have of the Jewish people? This refers to the tefillin that we put on the head. The tefillin that we put on the head, that tefillin is visible, and they will see it, so to speak, and they will realize this is a holy nation, and they will have fear of us. All right. Okay, so now you read this Gemara, and what is it telling us? God is wearing tefillin? And also, what is the connection between the idea that we put on the tefillin shel rosh and the nations of the world have fear of us? You understand my question? What's the connection between the tefillin shel rosh and the nations of the world having fear of the Jewish people? Very important. I want to explain this. So, let me see, maybe I'll bring out the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat. Give me a moment, just in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Yod Bet. Here it is. Yoseh Adam, Tane de Rabbi Ishmael. Yoseh Adam b'tefillin be'erev Shabbat im chashecha. It is permissible for a person to have his tefillin on Erev Shabbat, as before the sunset, even though you would say, well, maybe he shouldn't have the tefillin on, maybe he'll forget that he has the tefillin on, it's like you're carrying on Shabbat, not to mention you're not supposed to wear tefillin on Shabbat, but that's a different story. The problem here is tiltul. So he says, why do we allow the person to have tefillin on Erev Shabbat? He's walking outside, and he said, no, you can put on your tefillin. But aren't you worried that the sun might set, Shabbat might start, and then he would be carrying the tefillin? Here's the reason. A person has an obligation to always feel his tefillin. Always be aware that tefillin is on. How are you aware that tefillin is on your head? If you feel it. Like, you know, we say, right? Why? This is called Machol and Mesis. The Kohen Gadol in the Bet HaMikdash, one of his clothing was a crown. He had a crown of gold. On the crown of gold was inscribed, Kodesh LaHashem, holy unto God. This crown. Or LaHashem Kodesh. Or for God, this is holy. And the Gemara says, Masis she'en bo el askara achat amra Torah ve'al mizchot tamid shelo asiyat Torah. So now with respect to the sis, it says that when the Kohen would put the sis on the crown on his forehead, it had the name of God, and the name of God was on his forehead, literally. And it says he can't distract himself from this name because the name is holy, and it's on his head. Let's think about bad thoughts, right? The name of God is there, and you're going to just forget that the name of God is there. You understand the problem? So he says, when you have the cease, you have to be constantly thinking about it. Tefillin sheish ben haskarot habeh, the tefillin that has numerous haskarot, 20, I believe, was it 26 times that the name of Hashem appears in the tefillin over and over again, right? I already said it once, right? But so now when you have the tefillin on your head, the name of God is on your head numerous times. Like the Kohen Gadol is one time, the tefillin is many times. So the Gemara says, we're not worried about the person forgetting to take off his tefillin before Shabbat, because he's always thinking about the tefillin. That's the law. When you have the tefillin on, you have to be thinking about the tefillin. But they're very important when you put the tefillin on to be, to make sure your mind is clear and free of any thoughts that would be disrespectful to the names of God appearing on your forehead. Right? You understand the idea? So that's the thing. When Am Yisrael has the tefillin, it creates within us a certain fierceness. The name of God is literally on our forehead every single morning. And that name, we respect the name when we revere it, and we're careful. We're just have the tefillin on. I'm not gonna, be careful. Sometimes people they scroll on their phone and you have the tefillin on. I don't know what's showing up. Sometimes you have things on social media that you like. But I have to say, I watch sometimes YouTube and they get commercials. Who chooses these commercials even? I don't understand. Video games and all these things. I guess people like that. Okay, anyway, getting back to this. I'm sorry, that was an aside. The point is you have the tefillin on and you're supposed to be careful. You have to have your mind clear of impure thoughts. That strength, when we do that gives us a certain fierceness. And the Goyim see it. And they're like, this is a holy nation. I mean, you can't bluff this. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you see these religious figures, especially among the Goyim, and it's just a con job, right? You see it, they're just, right? And so you can't pretend. So when Am Yisrael in the days of the Mashiach, everybody's going to be putting on tefillin, and everybody's going to be at a high level of kedusha, especially the mental kedusha that the tefillin engenders. That's going to create that feeling of fear. This is a holy nation, right? All right. Now let's get back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we're always thinking about the Almighty when we have tefillin on. And now you see what a beautiful midrash this is. When it says, how do we know that God is putting on tefillin? Well, what does God's tefillin have in it? Our tefillin has Kadesh Lichol Bechol, Ve'akiv Yacha, Yesiat Mitzrayim, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Elenu, Adonai Echad, God is one. Right? Ve'haya, Yishma Tishmu. What does God's tefillin have in it? Meaning, we're thinking of God. We have the tefillin on, we're thinking of the Almighty. Okay, what is God thinking of? So now, that's what this Gemara is going to be saying. Tefillin de mare alma ma kativ behu. What does the tefillin of God have written in it? Amaleh, it says, Umi ke'amecha Yisrael go echad. There's a beautiful pasuk in Divrei Yamim. Who is like the nation of Israel? A unique nation. Goy echad ba'aretz. Now, you see the parallelism? We say Shema Yisrael Adonai Elenu Adonai Echad. So God has Umi ke'amecha Yisrael go echad. You see that? Beautiful, no? So now you understand the idea of the tefillin. The idea of the tefillin is we're always thinking of God, and God is always thinking of us. You see how beautiful that is? Meaning, nothing happens to the Jewish nation haphazardly. Everything is part of a very careful, precise plan, and God is thinking about us, God is protecting us, whatever that form that protection takes, miraculous or natural protection, however it is, God is thinking of the Jewish people. So we think of God, God is thinking of us, right? And that's the matrix of that special relationship is the tefillin, right? And that's the book of Shir HaShirim. The book of Shir HaShirim is a special, beautiful relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael, right? So the Gemara asks the question: is it true that God he feels a sense of praising the Jewish people is praiseworthy? Yes, this is true. God does want to praise the Jewish people. Dichtiv et Adonai he'emarta hayom, v'Adonai he'emirecha hayom. Let me give you the explanation of this pasuk. This pasuk appears in Perashat Kitavo. Perashat Kitavo is the fifth to the last parasha of the Torah. Kitavo Nisavim Vayelech. fifth to the last parasha in the Torah, Kitavo. And in Parashat Kitavo, we begin to seal the covenant between the Jewish people and the Almighty. The covenant started in Mount Sinai. That was the beginning. And then over the 40 years in the desert, we learned the laws. And now in Parashat Kitavo, we have the Beracha, and we begin to finalize the Berit with God. And the Pasuk says as follows. Et Adonai emarta hayom. You have declared today that God is your king. Meaning you have lifted up God through your speech, right? And so I could just do it this way. Much better. Okay, more stable. Okay, Vadonai he'emirecha hayom. And similarly, God is lifting you, the Jewish nation, up through His speech. Meaning, we declare God is King. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. God declares we are a special nation. So there is this reciprocal relationship between God, the Almighty, and Am Yisrael, Am Kadosh. God told the Jewish people as follows: Atem asituni hativa achat ba'olam, or hativa echad ba'olam, ve'ani. I'm sorry, I lost it. Atem asituni hativa achat ba'olam. Skip the bracketed remark. You made me a separate unit in the world. I'll explain that in a moment. And I'm going to make you a separate unit in the world. Okay. Let me ask you. You tell me. What does it mean? Atem asituni hativa achat ba'olam. You made me a separate unit in the world. What does that even mean? Any ideas? How did we make God separate, or declare that God is separate? We declare that God is separate. What does that mean?
From our actions, or our beliefs.
Well, the whole idea of kadosh, right, is separation.
Correct.
By making the carrying the mitzvot, you're separating.
But we're saying, Atem asituni, you made me, says God. Hativa achat ba'olam, you made me separate, a separate unit in the world. How?
Well, maybe think about even the commandments, the statements, right? Saying there's only one God.
Correct.
You shouldn't use my name in vain. So you're creating those barriers.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Let me explain to you what Echad means. Echad doesn't just mean there's one God. Of course, there's one God. Echad means this God is wholly and completely separate from everything else, right? When I said this on Shabbat, because we were studying the Aseret Diberot, for those of you who were here, and I explained, I think in Simchat Shishit maybe, that there is no physical or ontological relationship between the Almighty and the world, right? The Almighty exists complete. He existed before the world, and there is nothing outside God that somehow limits Him or somehow shapes Him or designs Him. No, God existed by Himself, and all the rules of existence, be them the rules of physics, be them the rules of chemistry, be them the rules of biology, whatever rules, quantum mechanics, theory of relativity, general theory, special theory of relativity, all these rules were made by Him, right? So there is nothing outside of God that somehow is above God, you understand? But the world that He created is completely separate from Him, right? He doesn't exist in the world the same way. The example I brought on Shabbat was if I write a story. I don't exist in the pages of the story. I create characters. The characters exist on the pages. I don't exist in the page. I exist outside the book, right? You understand the idea? So, Atem asituni hativa achat, you declared me. When you say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, you're supposed to be thinking how God is not just one, but He is completely unique. And His level of existence is a completely different level of existence. The same way the level of existence of an author is way higher than the level of existence of the words that he pens on the pages of his book. You all see that, or is there somebody who doesn't see that? Right? That's Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So God says, you declared me to be a special existence in the world. separate. And by the way, you were right. Kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. It's exactly what kadosh means. Separate, 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 but not just separate in a negative sense. Higher, higher, higher. That's the custom came to kind of like jump. Okay, that's the idea, because it's not just Kedusha doesn't just mean separate in the sense of, oh, I'm different than you, you're different than me. It means a higher level of existence, a higher level of existence, a higher level of existence. Isn't that something? Yeah. So God says, because of this, I'm going to make you a separate level of existence from all the nations in the world. Right? The existence of the Jewish people is going to be something separate and unique and higher than all the nations. By the way, I think the population in Israel now is around 10 million. And it's becoming really remarkable. I think in 1950 it was maybe 1.2 million, if I'm not mistaken. Right? It's unbelievable what's happening in that country. It's simply, it's a regional power now. You know, people say, why is Donald Trump so pro-Israel? He's not pro-Israel. Israel is an ally of America, which brings more good to America, in my opinion, than America brings to Israel. I'm not trying to be, how shall we say, I'm not trying to be an ingrate. I recognize everything that America does for Israel. I think God blessed America for that. So I very much recognize that, and I love Donald Trump and his support of Israel. But Israel is supporting America, right? We give America intelligence information that they would never get, but for the fact that we're sending our soldiers and the Mossad and our technology. So it's what an alliance should be. But look at this: there's an alliance between the most powerful country in the world and the state of Israel, right? That's remarkable. But it's like I tell you, I think I'm going to go into business with Donald Trump. He's my partner now. Like, well, what are you talking about? I own an apartment over there. Like, why don't the Donald Trump want to make an alliance with me? Like, what? That's ridiculous, right? But here it is, the little state of Israel and the United States of America. So they've had this decades-long alliance, not because they're trying to be nice, because they love us. I get it. We have shared values. Okay, that's not what this is about. But the UK now has shared values with America. America is distancing itself from the UK. Why? Because it's becoming a weaker country. Because it's really, the economy is in shambles. The demography there is terrible. So shared values is not enough to be the foundation of an alliance. They're making an alliance with Israel because Israel is really a partner which gives a lot of value to the U.S. So how can that even be? Yeah. I'm going to make you a separate nation now. This is just the beginning. When the Mashiach comes, we're just seeing the very beginning of it now. Understand? So the following question came up in the Bet Midrash. The Tefillin Shalosh has 4 compartments, right? So in our Tefillin Shalosh, we have Kadesh Lichol Bechol in the first one. We have Ve'ayaki Ve'achan the second one. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad in the third. And then the fourth one we have Ve'ayim Shemot Yishme'u. So the question now is, okay, you gave me one pasuk. One of the compartments of the Tefillin of God is, who is like the nation of Israel, a unique, separate nation in the world? But what about the other 3? Amaleh kimi goy gadol, umi goy gadol, ashrecha Yisrael. Who is a huge nation? Now, umi goy gadol, or who is a huge nation like Israel? And I take this to be huge because you can measure quantity in space, and you can measure quantity in time. And if you look at the time axis, who is a huge nation like the Jewish people, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. Is there another nation that's been existing? The Chinese today basically have been taken over by the communists. I'm not sure. Is there another nation which still has the original law, which still has the original values? Right? No, it doesn't exist. Ashrecha Yisrael. This is a pasuk in Zot HaBeracha. או הנישא אלוהים, לקחת לו גוי מקרב גוי. That's a pasuk in Beit Hanan. Ultitecha Elyon. So all these pasukim are in the Tefillin Shel Rosh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So again, I just want to summarize this, and then if we have time, we'll go do the next Gemara and also take some questions. I think we reached the end actually. But the idea here is that we are obligated to think of God, to revere God's name, to ponder upon His name. And when we have the Tefillin, that's when we say Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, and we're focusing our attention on the holiness and the uniqueness and the oneness of God. And in exchange for that, or as a reward for that, what the Gemara is teaching us here is God has Tefillin, meaning God is focusing His attention on the uniqueness and holiness and what makes the Jewish people a special, awesome nation. God is thinking about that as well, right? So here you see the very special relationship between the Jewish people and the Almighty. This relationship, the matrix of the relationship is the Tefillin. Okay, any questions?
Was there a parallel? So, like you said, Echad and Echad was the first matching up to
Yeah.
Second, third, and fourth have anything in common?
That's an interesting question. I didn't think about that. That's a very nice question. I like that question. I didn't think about it. Right. Interesting. Very nice question. In any order, but I like that. I like that type of thinking. That's excellent. All right. Any other questions? Maybe there's a question I can answer. No? All right, so I think maybe should we continue, or what do you say? It's up to you.
A few more minutes, yeah.
Okay, 5 minutes. All right, so we'll do the next week. So this is something that comes up a lot, especially, so there is this idea that, I'll read the Gemara, and then you'll see what I'm getting at. Amar Rabbi Chelbo, Amar Avulna, Kol HaKovea Makom Letfilato, Elohei Abraham Yeh Be'ezro. If a person establishes a set place for his prayer, the God of Abraham will help this individual. Again, it's time to pray, trying to say that to say the tefillah. So you want to pray in a place that you set for prayer. Okay. I just want to tell you, when people read Gemara, I'm just giving you my own opinion. Like, I'm in the minority, and I know most people disagree with me. I don't think everybody should be studying Gemara. I think people studying Gemara becomes destructive unless they are willing to respect the text and respect the words of the Gemara. I'll give you an example. So people use this as a reason for,
Kicking the guy out.
yeah, you're sitting on my seat, get up. I just humiliated the guy. No, but the Gemara says you have to be sitting in the same place every single time. Isn't that what it says? It actually doesn't say that at all. I mean, it literally doesn't say that at all. But I've actually been like, I remember I was in Israel, and it was like the high holiday, so a new guy from America moved to the area, and he bought a seat in the synagogue, and he paid money and everything. And the guy who normally sits there, I guess it was a mix-up, but he insisted upon kicking off this guy from his seat and embarrassed him in public. The guy left the synagogue. He was like, he just moved to the neighborhood. So later on he explained, no, it's my seat. So, okay, right? Like, there's a lot of seats, right? No, because God is going to help me now.
He doesn't need it.
I don't know. Like, I mean it seriously. I don't think everybody should be allowed to quote Gemara, to read Gemara, to study Gemara, unless you're willing to respect the actual words of the Gemara. It says, Kol HaKovea Makom Litfilato. Now, first of all, the tefillah is not when you're sitting. The tefillah means you're standing. It's referring to the Amidah. So that's number one. Number two, what does it mean, Kol HaKovea Makom Litfilato? So, we're going to see that next week. I want to go into this. But it doesn't mean that, okay? So, the tefillah, okay, like so today, I usually pray here in the morning. A few months ago, my son had a berit milah in this city, and I had to pray there. Like, was that a problem that it's not in the same place? Because usually I pray here, and I prayed there, right? I seem to be going against the Gemara, no? Now, I know that the Harambam, when he was born in Cordova, and then he eventually moved to Egypt. So where did he pray? Did he go back to...
No, every day, no.
Okay. No, I mean, I just want to show you, like, people, they say things, and like, what are you even talking about? Like, how does this make any sense? Like, how can any rational person, in fact, that person who kicked my friend out of his seat, my friend was humiliated. He ended up going to another synagogue after that. But the point is, like, that person who kicked him out of his seat, did he never travel in his life? He never, like, that's every single tefillah for the rest of his life. That's where he was. He never went to his in-laws, never did nothing. Somebody once came to me out of Shabbat, like practically crying. We used to pray Mincha Gedolah. And says, Rabbi, I need you to do Hatarat Nedarim for me. I said, what happened? He said, I made a Shavuah that I made an oath that I'm never going to visit my in-laws again. And now my wife is going to divorce me if I don't go now to my Erev Shabbat. I have to go now to your in-laws. I was literally crying. He wanted me to do Hatarat Nedarim for him. So you never went to your in-laws before? Right? You never went anywhere? This is where you pray every single time. So again, I'm just saying it to point out how sloppy minds make the Gemara look like a sloppy text, which it is not. So next week we will explain what this really means. Of course, makom means some sort of mental space. Even in English, you use the word space in that sense. Right? Have a certain mental space when you pray. A special mental space. That's what makes the tefillah powerful. Okay. Next week to be continued.